Hey everyone, welcome to the talk. As the slide says, I really believe in research being a process, not a goal or a destination. This is what keeps you energized every time you are taking up a project, uh, because someone else is going to beat what you built, or you're going to beat it yourself. So if you think of it as a process, you're going to enjoy it much, much more. And as I was thinking about the talk today, I really wanted to structure in a way where if you don't know the context about me or my academic or industry journey, it's very hard to really understand the lessons that I learned and put it in context. So I'm actually going to talk about myself first. This is the outline of my talk. I'm going to give you a little bit of the journey that I had in academia and in industry, and then share a few examples, projects, and the lessons I learned, as well as the lessons I learned as a manager supporting people. I have to caveat everything that I say. There is no right or wrong answer in things like these. It's about principles and the philosophy, and you sticking to those principles. So just be aware of that. So whatever I'm going to say might be actually contradictory to some beliefs that you have, or might be reinforcing some beliefs you have. So okay, let's a little bit about me. I grew up in India, and uh, I come from a family where we were not as well off, but one of the things that I still remember is on the left side is actually this really it's a phone booth. So this was in 90s. Today, if I have to talk to someone, I just open up my phone, do a Zoom call or a Facebook call or a WhatsApp call or whatever it is. Back then, we had to walk 20 minutes to talk to whoever you wanted to talk to. And I used to live uh, in another state from my family. And for me, I have to walk 20 minutes every week, talk for 1 to 2 minutes because it was so expensive. And that was the best moments as a child, where I could talk to my grandparents or my aunts and uncles and tell them about all the awesome things that I was doing at school and things that I was learning and I was achieving. That stuck with me. So the when I joined Facebook, and the commission of Facebook was actually connecting people, giving people a voice so they can actually connect with others and things they care about, it resonated with me. So the first thing that I wanted to at least share is work for something that resonates, work for a mission that resonates with you, because during the tough times and during the great times, you will have something to hold on to. This is my mom. When I actually started managing, and when our group was 10 people and I had to grow it to 20, and I was really obsessed and spending a ton of energy growing the team, I thought it was all about me. I thought it was about all the actions that I was doing. I thought it was all about how I could build the group and do better. And my mom actually instilled one important thing that is still stuck with me. She said, many things in your life is not about you. It's actually about what you do for others. It's how you serve and how much you have helped others. And as a joke, she was saying that she lifted the family for 30 years. I was 30 back then. So I was just to kind of pull her leg, lifted her, and I held her for 3 seconds. It's like now I'm holding the responsibility, and it's quite heavy. But the fun part aside, the most important thing that I learned there was we always think that many of the decisions, many of the things we are doing is about us, but it's actually not. It's what we are trying to achieve is mostly for others and how to serve others. And if you lead the life that way, it's much more fulfilling and it will keep you more motivated. So that stuck with me. This is my sister and her family along with my parents. One important lesson that I learned when we were young, we used to joke at each other. I used to get some rank, and she used to get something better, and there was this healthy competition between us. Obviously, whoever did better got an additional treat from my parents. So we took a big bet when we were young, and the bet was whoever becomes doctor first will have to give a big treat to the other person. And I definitely didn't want to lose to my sister, but I always knew back in my head that if I lose to her, it's not the end of the world. I'll actually feel great about it. And ironically, I did lose. She became doctor before me, even though I chose engineering and she chose medical. But an important lesson I learned there is losing is actually not that bad, whether it's in research or in life. It's who you lose to and how you lose. So uh, whenever I today these days, or whenever we talk about, hey, a particular method is working better than our method, I actually take it with grace. I actually try to learn from it, and I actually encourage others to do the same. So because we can then improve together rather than try to make it an unhealthy competition. And then the last thing that I want to share about me before we get into the actual part of the talk is priorities change very quickly. That's on the left is my son. He's 2.5 years old. On the right is my daughter. She's 1 year old. If you had going back a few years, if I could tell myself one thing, it would be to actually make the most of my present, make the most of the time I have. With two young kids, the amount of time you have is much less. I can still balance my career. I'm able to do a lot of awesome things there, but I have to spend a significant amount of energy taking care of the young ones, making sure they're well fed, changing their diapers, making sure that they're learning, and then also at the same time be healthy. Back then, I had a singular purpose. It was always about learning and working. I wish I had actually done a lot more during those days and had the value of time, which now I realize is much, much more. So, one thing, if I could tell you, if you're earlier in your career, is don't waste the time. Live in the present and make sure you're making most of the present, because the priorities as you go might change quickly. So that's a little bit about me. The only reason I had that section is for you to understand how I approach many of the decisions I take, as well as what motivates me. If you don't know that, the rest of the things will not be as contextual as they can be. So I want to focus on the academic journey, corporate journey, and then talk a little bit about the successful projects and the lessons that I learned in that while doing those projects, and then end with some of the lessons I learned just as a manager. On the academic journey, one myth I wanted to debunk is you don't need to be the best in your class from the beginning. I was absolutely not. Now, I don't consider myself successful in any way, and my career is, if anything, probably still beginning. I hope to work in research and in this field for at least the next 30 years or more. Um, but the first bullet point is very, very important. And it is something that I want to make sure enough people are paying attention to. Because if you don't have the perfect starts in your life, it doesn't mean you cannot have a perfect journey, or it doesn't mean you cannot have achieve bigger things. What I remember though is if I was passionate about something, I really gave it all. I really did the best I could in those things. So I remember being really good in a few subjects and being the best in the class. And it was this ironic debate in the class. It's like, how come this person is so good in this but is not the best in class? It was because I didn't care about other things. I only cared about what I actually wanted to learn. So it's okay for you to be not best in the class. Fast forward, there are a few things that also helped me. My dad used to work for a bank, so we used to move from one place to another. So it really made me adapt to new environments, new languages, new kinds of people, and new goals, new schools, um, and new ways of learning. So if at any point in your career you get an opportunity to learn from different people, different environments, do it. Adapting is the best thing you could do to be resilient to the changes that will happen in the future. The third, I remember this very, very well, and this was a pivotal moment for my academic journey. So in my undergrad, we had this 4 year course. Out of the first 2 years, you get to choose, you don't get to choose any electives. You basically do the basic courses of computer science. But the next 2 years, you could basically choose what you want to do. You could go into any of the work streams, whether it's databases, AI, machine learning, compilers, optimization, so on and so forth. So first 2 years, we took all the courses. It was great. But the first semester of the third year, I was confused. I didn't know whether I wanted to get into computer vision, NLP, speech, machine learning. By then, back then, computer vision and machine learning were different, by the way. I know now everybody equates them to AI. Databases. So I went to the dean and I said, I want to take all the electives. So I figured out which one I need to do. In the history of our university, nobody did that. They chose two or three and they went with it. I chose 7 electives. That was the maximum you could choose in a semester. I remember I could not sleep more than 4 hours a day for 5 straight months. But I knew I wanted to do that because I didn't know what electives I wanted to go for and where I wanted to spend my energy. Thanks to all of that grueling effort for 6 months, 5 to 6 months actually, at the end of it, computer vision won. And back in 2004, that is when I started computer vision. It's been almost 17 years. I'm so glad I did it. And the foundation for what I wanted to do was set. It convinced me that I wanted to do computer vision because I have done all of the electives. So I didn't have any qualms, or I didn't have any doubts that I was excited about NLP or speech or databases or compilers. So when there is the right time, give it all you got, push your limits. That's the only way you will actually improve. So fast forward, after my undergrad, I knew that I wanted to go for a PhD. I wanted to do research, but many times you don't have to go in straight lines. So I ended up joining SRI, which was one of the biggest computer vision research labs, and I was very fortunate to get into it. It allowed me to do contract R&D for 3 years, after which I applied for my PhD, and that's how I got into Georgia Tech. Now I have applied to many other universities. I in fact wanted to get into CMU because I was interested in robotics, and CMU was the best place in robotics. Georgia Tech was actually not that bad, and in fact probably second best. I learned a ton in Georgia Tech, so I was very happy with having admitted to Georgia Tech. So that's a little bit about my academic journey. Next up, what I did in Facebook. Now, during my PhD, I did few internships. I did an internship in IBM Research. I did an internship in Google Research, and then I did an internship at Facebook. I chose to join Facebook over other companies because there was not a lot of computer vision happening back then at Facebook, which was mind-boggling to me. And one of the mentors I have is obviously my dad, among many other technical mentors. And I was genuinely confused which job I should take. When I got an offer from Facebook, and I got 5 or 6 other offers, I had a call with my dad. I asked him, how do you choose? What is the framework to choose? My heart tells me this, but logically, this is the other thing that I think everybody would choose. He made it quite simple for me. He said, go to a place which will allow you to have the most amount of impact while you are learning. Many times in our life, you get an opportunity to choose one or the other. You either get to learn a lot, but you won't have as much impact, or you get to have a ton of impact, but you do pretty much what you know. If you can go to a place which actually allows you to do both, that will have an amazing acceleration for your career because you are learning every day, but you're also being very effective and useful for the world. That's kind of one of the reasons I joined Facebook, and it was one of the best decisions I made. I played a big role, but many people forget that when you are actually one of the first people doing something, you have to do everything. So I did JavaScripting to build tools for annotations. I actually built the first GPU machine on my desk to run deep learning models, to convince leadership that we should be getting into deep learning and AI research. It was not just me. There were 2 other people. 3 of us actually did it. The thing that I wanted to share here is it never dawned on me that I was a researcher, or I was a PhD, or I was doing a particular kind of work. I only cared about doing everything that was needed to make the project successful and to make the mission successful. And I played every role. And in turn, because I did that, I learned a ton. I actually learned a lot. And that was actually one of the goals, right? Learn a lot while having tremendous amount of impact. So everything was going well, and that is when things you get surprises. So our manager, the group manager, left abruptly, and our computer vision group was 5 people, very small. I knew everybody. I was actually the tech lead, and I was taking all of the technical shots. So when the manager left, I was actually in New Zealand hiking because I had to present at a conference, and I took a vacation, and I got a call at 4 a.m. that my manager left. And I immediately had a 4 a.m. group call. This was New Zealand time, but here it was in afternoon. And convinced everybody that we had a clear vision, we had a clear mandate, and we'll find a leader. Don't worry about it. And instinctively, I became the leader. And initially, I thought of it as a temporary thing, and I wanted to bring in another leader who can support us so we can actually do the technical work. But later on, I realized you should not fight your instincts. It's okay to go with the flow when some things feel natural. Even if in the beginning you didn't think that was how it's supposed to be. I never wanted to be a manager. I was not thinking about being a manager, but I ended up becoming one. And then I started growing the computer vision organization. I just quickly realized I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it as much as coding. I enjoyed it as much as doing research and building things, publishing. giving talks. So I ended up doing that. The next thing in my chapter is, as I was scaling this organization, I was faced with one important challenge, which is, how do I focus on research and impact? One of the things you will learn is, when you have a singular purpose or singular mission, it's an easy place to be. So let's say you're a researcher doing fundamental research. You're only thinking about, how do I solve this problem? What is the research that I can do? Where can I publish? But you're not thinking about the practical application of it, because that comes later. Flip the coin, you go to the product side. You're only thinking about making the product successful, doing whatever is needed, the engineering to make the product successful. You're not thinking about, am I solving a hard problem? Am I doing research in the right way? When you're actually an applied researcher, the irony is, you can't do only one of them. You have to do both. You have to really think about the hardest problems that you need to tackle for a particular product experience, and find creative ways to solve, as well as keep on uh, figuring out how to evolve the product. And to me, that was one of the most challenging roles. And that's what I told many of the folks that I hired. If you want to be in applied research, you have to alternate between the reality and making something work and doing the science for it. And you need to connect the two. And that's a very difficult job compared to doing research and thinking about product later, or thinking about product but not thinking about research. Having done that for 5 years and grew the organization to more than hundreds of people and many teams, I went back to my core. One of the reasons I actually got into computer vision or AI was, I wanted to do the research. I wanted to be in research. So as we were settling in, I was getting very comfortable. Every day I woke up, most of the things I had to do in the day were easy. They were things I knew how to do. I wanted to change that. You cannot settle down and be in your comfort zone. So I disrupted everything that I did. I gave away all the teams, and I came back to FAIR and started a new research group focused on perception and robotics. This is another lesson that I learned. If it's too easy, if things feel normal, if you know how to do it, time to change. That is the only way you're going to learn. That is the only way you're going to grow. Right now, I lead a group on perception and robotics. This is a fundamental research group. Now, having said that, I already mentioned that doing fundamental research is a challenge in itself, but you always want to go for the even bigger challenge. The bigger challenge here is, many of the research outcomes that we have are driven by individuals or small teams. We don't know how to build larger teams that do focused, sustained research for long periods of time towards breakthroughs. This is something nobody has figured out. And that is one of the things that I'm trying to figure out in the context of perception and robotics. So that is a little bit about my corporate journey. So those are the three facets of my history and my journey, where I came from, the decisions that I had to make in academia and academic settings, as well as the decisions and the journey that I had in Facebook to be in the role that I am currently in. I was thinking about how to structure what are the various lessons and answer some of the questions that people might have when you think about lessons learned or sharing your personal stories. Now, I try to simplify my world, even though it's not perfect. A simplified imperfect world is better than a complex imperfect world, or a simplified perfect world, because simplified perfection doesn't exist. So when I was thinking about the projects, you can think about all the lessons you learn and forget about the projects and only share the lessons, but they will be out of context. But you could also share one project after another, but they will be disjoint. So I really try to make it chronological. That way people can resonate with it. Let me start with the first project that I started at Facebook. This was my internship project. And the story behind this is, as I said, when I joined Facebook, I didn't see a lot of people doing computer vision. And there are a bunch of lessons that I learned, which is on the right, but the context is, Facebook was a social graph back then. So social graph had these nodes, which are users. And when you connect with another user, you get an edge. When you upload a photo, when you write a status update, you get another edge. And those are the various nodes. As I was thinking about various internship projects, I didn't jump into an internship project. I actually worked for a week, talked to as many people as I could, understood the context of the company, understood the infrastructure. And then I realized how important it would be to make this social graph a semantic graph. So whenever there is a photo or a video, You actually apply AI models, vision models in this case, and provide metadata that could be useful for various product groups instead of thinking about a particular product group. So I had this idea, I wrote up, I went to the leaders I talked to, and I pitched it. I did not expect the reaction I got. Pretty much everybody dismissed it. Everybody said this won't necessarily help. A few people said this was an interesting idea. You should definitely try it out because it was an internship. A couple of people said it would change their world. It would make their world so much better if they had access to such information. I was not disheartened. In fact, if anything, I learned a few lessons. And I actually ended up building this. And this is one of the most used systems today. And people cannot imagine many of the things at Facebook not using this. So what were the lessons learned here? I was not afraid of thinking big from the start. I really didn't think of a particular one of experience and built it. I built it in a way where this is scalable from day one, and any product group at Facebook can use it. And that was a big deal. That is actually what propelled the project as well as many of the efforts that we had in this space. Second, because I had to do it this way, I could not use existing tools. I could not lean on heavy engineering done by others, so I can just focus on research. So I ended up having to do everything from engineering to research. And I realized how critical it is to do right engineering. Because if you don't do the engineering properly, you're not going to be able to do research properly. Third, I latched onto those one or two groups that I really wanted, these features instead of thinking about all the other groups. So you always wanted to start small. That gives you the focus, and then you can build on it. Finally, when I actually pitched it to leadership, I pitched it in the language that they understood. I didn't go and talk about computer vision models, gist or hog features. I really changed the tone of what I was doing. I basically told them that I was making the social graph semantic, that every node in social graph will have this additional metadata. You don't need to worry about what models produce the metadata. You just need to worry about what the metadata is and how it will be useful. These were some of the lessons that I learned, and looking back, they were pivotal. Fast forward, a project that I'm really proud of doing, and this is obvious now, but it was definitely not obvious in 2015, is every time Facebook a photo comes to Facebook, we actually enable automatic alt text, which is a voiceover that actually says what is in the photo. In this case, two people smiling, wearing sunglasses in front of a beach. This particular feature was something I remember when I wrote my first computer vision paper. I wrote, it would be awesome to have such a system where blind people can interact. It stuck with me and I carried it over. So when actually some of the image classification systems started working, I went to the leadership and I said, there are 1 million or more visually impaired people that are using Facebook. So we are not catering to the billions. We are catering to a small number, but for that small number, this feature will change their world. And I got like tremendous amount of support. And we ended up actually going all the way from research to building the product experience, working with the product group and launching automatic alt text, for which we won the FTC award for communication. There were a bunch of amazing lessons we learned here. Now, one of them is it's not always about the number. So when you're doing your research, when you're working on your project, don't think that that has to change the world for everybody. Even if it changes the world for a small number of people, even if it's meaningful for a small number of people, the project is going to be impactful. And what you're doing is meaningful. That's why making a big difference to small people is much, much more important than making a small difference to many people. It has its value, but both kinds of projects have their value. I also learned one of the toughest things in my career. Launching a product is extremely hard, much, much, much harder than what I thought it would be. So I encourage every researcher thinking about practical applications to actually go through this experience at least once in their life. The amount of engineering, amount of oversight, amount of coordination, and thinking about the end user is significantly higher than anybody can imagine and any researcher can imagine. So the reason I encourage many researchers to do this is not because they enjoy building a product or they enjoy going through this experience. It's because they respect the engineering that is done. They respect the product work that is being done. And they understand that having the idea and making that idea work is just the beginning of the journey. Taking that idea, making it work at scale, launching it to people, have it used every day is significantly hard itself. So there is now a mutual respect between people who are actually doing research and people who are actually building product. The next project, so I won't bore you with the video, so we can move on to this one. So when things were going great, we launched automatic call text. We were building the group. I was thinking about what would be the next thing for my group. And at the same time, I saw this crazy uptick in number of videos that were coming to Facebook. Now, I always try to be ahead of the curve in terms of what the needs are. That is how you can anticipate. That is how you can actually start projects that are research that can have meaningful impact. If you're catching up, then you're pretty much not doing research. You are having impact. And if you're doing irrelevant research, then you will do awesome research, but it will not be translating to impact anytime soon. It will take decades. So identifying the big moments before they happen and taking those bets is one of the things that I challenge myself and I challenge the group. So at that time, I saw this uptick in videos. It was not necessarily obvious that you needed video models or temporal models, but I ended up reaching out to this intern, Dutron, is his name, phenomenal person who has been working on video. And I said, hey, do you want to come do an internship with me? And I'm actually coding up myself on some of the video models. It will be great to have you as my intern and we can both do it together. So both of us, and I was never a mentor for him. I was actually genuinely working with him because I was excited about these models. Both of us spent countless days. Internships are usually 3 months. So we were really pushing for this pre-trained representations in video and got a huge pushback from everyone else that it would not work and might not have the value, but we stuck to it. Now this is not a happy story because we ended the internship and we didn't have any meaningful results. C3D, as we called it at that time, was not born yet, but we really believed in this area. So I actually remember after the internship I told you, hey, I'm going to be visiting Dartmouth. He was a PhD student in Dartmouth. I flew to Dartmouth and I spent a weekend there coding with him, making this work. So we did it. I came back. We launched a job. Each of the training job took 3 to 4 weeks actually at that time. So we just ran the job and we forgot about it. 3 weeks later, Dew tells me, Mano, it works. We have the best numbers in video models and C3D actually works. We were related and there were a bunch of lessons we learned at that time. I learned at that time. It was the 6th or the 7th attempt when things started working. So they won't work the first few times. Don't give up. Hold on to your idea, hold on to your belief and keep trying. We actually, so it took 3 or 4 weeks for the model to train. At the end of it, we were, I think we were a day or 2 later where we had to submit to CVPR. So we actually ended up pushing through that whole night and 2 nights and pushed a paper that got rejected. Of course, all good papers get rejected the first time because you want to make it even better later. The last lesson I learned here is simpler is better. C3D was one of the simplest video models at that time. Now, after that, there are so many amazing models that we have. Going back to the statement that I said, research is a process, not a destination. C3D was not the end of the video models. It was the beginning of temporal convolution models. And we had R2 plus 1D, CSNs, and many other models after that. So this was an interesting project and a great experience. And I really cherish the moments that we had in this project. This was actually one of the visuals from the paper. Okay, so continuing the theme of anticipating the future needs, one of the things that I noticed as we were taking on many projects is the amount of annotation needs we needed. So while we were excited about all the great progress, I saw a huge bottleneck in front of me. And the bottleneck was every time we had to build a model, we had to annotate a ton of photos and videos. So we had a strategic meeting how to remove that bottleneck. And internally, we were like, hey, we have this amazing amount of data which comes with these hashtags. Can't we use that? But when we actually embarked on this project, our best guess was to be able to match the speeds of fully supervised systems, not beat it. To our big surprise, we actually ended up training models at a scale using the weakly supervised data that actually beat fully supervised models significantly. And that is how we achieved state of the art in ImageNet. This was in 2016. The lesson here was using our assets wisely. We had this Instagram hashtags that we had access to in Facebook, and we never ended up using it for the first 3 years. Can you believe that? Looking back, everybody would say you were stupid. But looking forward, fully supervised systems were the way to go back in 2015-16. It was when we did this work that convinced us to go after pre-trained representations in a weakly supervised way. And we found ways to remove the noise or to ignore the noise. We found ways to scale training the models, and we found ways to take these generalized models and apply it to specific use cases. This is now the de facto way we do things at company. So this research project informed not just one project, but pretty much every other project across all other modalities on how to do weekly supervised learning using the assets. So many, many lessons here. And when we started this project, some of the most prominent researchers at Facebook were not with us. They actually had healthy skepticism on this project, which makes sense because we didn't show the value yet and we were not sure ourselves. But going back to the lessons, we had a very strong vision. And the strong vision was we need to remove the dependency on fully clean, annotated data. And that strong vision really helped us focus the project, keep on tackling one challenge after another with a very clear mission. And when we saw the first ray of hope where these models started to work and give us reasonable numbers, we didn't think about only matching fully supervised learning. We actually went thermonuclear on this. We scaled it to 3 billion photos. We scaled it to hundreds of GPUs. We ran months of experiments and we pushed it all the way. We took it even further. We actually landed it in production and helped with many product experiences. So this was one of the examples that I'm really proud of, where it originated from an idea and a vision, did all the work needed, pushed it all the way to get the best results, and landed it in production, all within a year. And the number of researchers that were on this project grew crazy because everybody was excited about this direction. While we were doing this project, we got a bunch of no's. We got a no in the beginning, we got a no during the process, we got a no in scaling, we got a no in landing it in production, because this was a radical thought and this was a radical idea. But we never took a no for answer. We kept convincing every person why this is the right thing to do. And that's how we got the impact that we got. This is my last story. Again, I might not play the video in the interest of time. Anticipating the future needs was definitely something that I pride myself as the leader of the organization and the group. So one of the things that I noticed was this crazy meteoric growth of online commerce. And ironically, many of the experiences that we were building in commerce were not AI centric. It was actually the experience being built and then AI helping. So I wanted to go on the offense this time, where we wanted to actually build the AI models and then build the commerce experiences, rather than build the commerce experiences and make them AI rich. This is how we got into AI for commerce. And I was able to acquire a company, work with Tamara and Alex Berg, who were professors and who started their own company at that time, bring all of them to Facebook. This was a challenging task because each of those companies, Groxtel was this other company driven by Sean Bell, and they had multiple other companies bidding for them. So all I had for them was the vision. I basically had to visualize the future myself. I put it in front of them. I said, you could join any other company, but if you really want 1 billion people thinking about shopping in a futuristic way, this is the place to be. And to convince them, I had to convince myself. I had to visualize that future first. Of course, COVID and everything that has happened has supercharged that vision. So when I actually had this vision, I wrote it up. I shared it with my leadership. Many of them were supportive. They gave me the resources to make it happen. I went and acquired the company and brought in Tamara and Alex. We created an AI for Commerce group, and that is now one of the strongest groups growing in the company, and Tamara Berg is leading it. The lessons that I learned here were actually quite valuable. First, you need to visualize the future yourself to basically convince others. Second, I remember when Sean Bell was actually graduating, I reached out to him because he won the detection competition at that time. And I said, do you want to join Facebook? He said, Mano, I want to do a startup. I didn't give up then. I actually loved my conversations with Sean. He was a fantastic leader. I knew he had a very bright future. I invested in that relationship. I actually reached out and helped in whatever way I can, connect with him periodically, check out how things were going. I had similar relationship with many of the faculty, because I actually fundamentally believe that we are trying to help each other. I'm not trying to do something to gain. I'm actually trying to learn. I'm actually trying to build a strong relationship. So investing in people and relationships goes a long way. When I first talked to Tamara, I was blown away by her leadership. Typically, many of the leaders talk a lot more, have a stronger confidence and voice. Tamara, on the other hand, was much more introverted and spoke very less. But when she spoke with precision. I identified a leader in her back then. Similarly, I identified many leaders in the beginning of their careers and I invested in them. What I focus on, and the lesson that I learned here, is you just need one superpower. You don't need a person to be great in everything. You actually need to supercharge that superpower and they'll do amazing things. And finally, when I actually went and acquired these companies, you spend a bunch of resources for the company, right? I had to put my neck on the line. I had to convince the leadership that within 2 years or three, we will reap the benefits and AI for commerce will be a big thing. I was not afraid to do it. I was bold. The downside was I made a wrong call. It could be, hey, the project was not well scoped or the timing was not right. But the upside was this huge opportunity where you can actually influence a billion people on how they shop online. So this was something that resonated with me. And even today, when I make some of my decisions, I really think about what is the boldest version of the decision rather than trying to play safe. Okay, so in my journey of building this organization and doing all of those projects, there were a lot of things that I learned, all the way from being a research scientist, software engineer, to being a tech lead, to being a manager, to being a director, and being a director of directors, and managing a huge organization, and now coming back to research. One thing that, and there is no right or wrong answer, but I think these principles hold for anybody, whether you are a PhD student, whether you are a manager, or whether you are an industry leader. The first and foremost one that I remember is I had a very strong vision for our org. And what I mean by that is I was very clear what we were not going to do. This helped me focus. This helped me bring people that were excited about the mission, that were excited in doing what they believe they will do, rather than going with every new person coming in with their own ideas and their own vision and diluting what we as an organization will do. Now we respect everybody's ideas who come in, but it is towards the mission that we have rather than being all over the place. This helped me hire the strongest, help focus the team, and have huge impact. The amount of energy I had to spend to hire was significant, but I always grew the team in slower than what everybody else wanted me to, because I focused on hiring the best. And the first thing that I do, and I interviewed every single person until we touched 40 people. After that, I could not interview anybody or everybody. I had to interview only a few people and I had to scale. One thing that I remember, after every interview, I would ask myself, what is their superpower and would I work for them? This simple two questions actually allowed me to hire the best. And best here doesn't mean they're all rounded all the time. Best here means they're best in one of those things. It could be amazing coder, amazing research insights, excellent communication, great collaborator, or many, many other facets. And the fact that I would work for them meant I would respect them, I enjoy working with them, and I'm going to learn from them. The third is I learned very quickly that diversity is key. So when we grew the team, there was a time when we didn't have a lot of diversity. And as I scaled the group, I really pushed for bringing in a tremendous amount of diversity, whether it's the country they're from, gender, ethnicity, or kinds of works that they were doing, people who did PhD, people who are undergrad, people who are masters, people from physics background, people from math background and optimization background and control background and so on and so forth. So the other thing is you always have to push for excellence. I never settled for mediocrity. I pushed the team for better and better. So if they did something better, I would raise the bar. You have to lead by example. For somebody to be inspired by you, you need to show up every day. You need to give in your best. You need to have that grit. You need to have the adaptability and put in all the hard work. I had to build the computer vision organization for 5.5 years. It was a lengthy process. All I had to do was show up every day and give my best every day. When I was doing this, there'll be a lot of firsts. I never managed. I never managed 5 people. I did not manage a team of 20 people. I did not manage 5 teams. I was not a director. I was not a director of directors. I did not launch a product before. I did not give a talk at a keynote in front of 100,000 people. I did not give an oral presentation in a conference before. Many, many, many firsts. And the last thing is, you don't need to be the smartest in the room. You really need to be smart enough to understand everybody in the room. This is what helped me when I grew the group. So those are the things I really wanted to keep as much time as possible for questions. So I'm going to breeze through the next ones. These are the lessons I learned in my life through the journey so far. When I'm unclear, I go after breadth instead of depth. I never optimized for earning more. I always optimized for learning more, and the earning actually followed. I will always try to take risks, especially when you can. In fact, you should always take risks. People play safe, and I think that's wrong. If you take risks, you actually enjoy the journey a lot more, and if you're successful, you'll get the 10x reward. If you're unsuccessful, you're going to learn. Managing people, when I started, felt like a power, but now I feel it's like a responsibility. It's not a benefit, it's actually a ton of responsibility that you take on. Adapting to the needs of the company, to the changes of the field, is something that will actually make you learn, and having that grit to go through every time is what will make you successful. It's not one-offs, it's not being lucky, it's not being in the right project, it's not working with the right people. It's basically adapting and grit that actually take you much farther. Finally, you're competing with yourself. I know that when we actually are in an academic curriculum, you're always thinking about the student next to you or the engineer next to you in a company. But honestly, in life, you're actually competing with yourself. And when you compete with yourself, you always improve because you know how to do some things better than your yesterday version. I try to set 3 clear priorities every time, and I change them once every few months. I focus on 3 things: work, family, and health. These are my current priorities. I pick 3 qualities that I try to improve. Again, this is how you can continue to improve. And again, I iterate on these topics. These are the ones that I focus on right now. And this is the final mantra that my dad shared when I was very young, and I hold it every time and every day. Uh, I always try to be happy with what I have. I'm not unhappy with a particular failure or with a particular outcome that I didn't anticipate. But at the same time, I think you should never be satisfied with what you have. You should always strive for more. You should always strive to do more. This is kind of a simplest uh, adage that stuck with me, thanks to my dad, who actually shared it with me when I was very young. And this is what drives me. So with that, I'll stop sharing, and I am more than happy to take any questions.